Okay,
Okay, we are
we're
good
good.
to go.
Okay, all right. Everyone, thank you. Good morning, where I'm from, or good afternoon, perhaps where you are. It's so fun to see where everybody's coming in from. Wouldn't it be great if we could get one person from every state at least? That would be amazing. And then, of course, other countries. I think maybe we'll challenge ourselves for that. I also enjoy the soup dilemma as a big fan of tortilla soup or what we call around here pozole soup. I definitely do not think cereal is a soup, Nicole. Sorry. But I appreciate the question. All
Yeah,
right.
that hurts. That hurts.
I'm also not a big cereal eater, but that's all right. All right. So I have a lot of information to go over with you today. So let me get started. This is not my first time doing this presentation. I do love to speak on this topic. It's a way of bringing my whole self to you today. So a lot of you I know, hello. A lot of you, if we don't know each other, please connect with me. All right. So next slide is just a little bit about, I very much feel where we're from, where we're grounded, says a lot about ourselves. So instead of introducing myself, other than what you've already heard today, here is where I come from. And so this is a picture of El Paso, Texas. And you have on one side here, I don't know if you can see it, where the X is, that's Mexico. That's our sister city, Juarez. On the other side is where I'm from, El Paso, where I live. And so right in the middle, you see river and canal, and then the bridge coming across it. So this is where I'm from. I literally take that road that you see right here next to the canal. I take it every day to work. It's just, it gives me a really interesting perspective that I notice when I'm everywhere. It really, it's different, right? And so that's my origin story. I do go by she, her, ella pronouns. I'm from a binational community. Keep in mind, my community is 82% Hispanic. You'll hear me say Hispanic, Latinx, a lot, Latino, Latina. So just all of that I'm using in the same context. But trust me, there is conversations to be had on each of those. We don't have time for that right now. For me, being from this place is a mashup of what it means to be American, Mexican, and very much something in between. So that's my perspective. I'm also a mom of two beautiful kids. I'm bilingual. Parents are immigrants. I was born here. Went to Texas A&M. If there's any Aggies in the house, I love to travel. I'm a big lover of travel and foodie. Any foodie lovers out there? Give me a heart if you guys are foodie lovers, because then we could talk about food. Yes, I see the hearts. Yay. All right. I have managed adults and volunteers 25 plus years. I love to do it as my passion. Y'all don't want to hear about that. So let me go on to the next slide. I'd like to start with the land acknowledgement. Like I said, I'm very much grounded in where I'm from. This acknowledgement I'm reading to you is from our University of Texas at El Paso, which is the largest serving Hispanic university in the country. And so I acknowledge that I'm on unceded indigenous land. The list of people you see there on the slide is who I'd like to recognize and pay respects to. So those are ties to our region: the Lipan, Mescalero, um, Chiricao, Apache, Piro, Manso, Suma, Humana, Isleta del Sur Pueblo, um, Pira, Manso, Tiwa, Indian tribe of the Pueblo of San Juan de Guadalupe, and Tortigas Pueblo. So I do recognize that all the indigenous peoples and communities who have been or have become a part of these lands and territories here in the Paso del Norte region. Just a little fact, this region is called Paso del Norte, or the Pass to the North, because that's where people would come up north to get to Santa Fe, New Mexico, which at the time was a big capital for the Spanish colonialism era. I honor their history and cultures and seek greater awareness of ways that can guide me in fruitful partnership and mutual fulfilling relationships. I also call for the reconciliation of the injustices carried out against them now and before, such as numerous broken treaties. So I encourage all of us to learn a little bit more about the traditional territories of our area. Whenever I travel, I have the Native Land app on my phone. I was recently up in Washington. I saw some people in Washington here. Um, oh my gosh, like so many cultural centers, so much information on the indigenous communities there. Love it. So just a little something about where I am from and the people that were here before me, my land. So my why for doing this today, believe it or not, I've done this about 5 times, this presentation myself. Um, it was a risk for me to suggest it way back at a Texas Volunteer Management Conference that was done virtually during COVID, I believe. I just put it out there. I said, let's see, because I'm not seeing anyone talk about it. I want to see more people represented. So let's just see. I took a risk. It was a very vulnerable moment. And since then, the response has been great. And I continue to speak on it when I can. So the topic really epitomizes for me a full circle moment. Um, I thought about it for a long time, like I said, and this is how I bring my whole self to work and to you all here today. I'm fortunate that my work has allowed me to serve adults, such as yourselves, who give their time and make the world a better place, right? Our volunteers. So I'm humbled that I get to elevate and focus my work in this topic. It's a way of giving back to the field. That's my why. But please keep in mind, I want everybody to hear me clearly. I am by no means an expert on Latinx volunteers. No one, right, can speak for such a large group. All I'm here to do is share my direct and years of experience in partnering with volunteers, both at a nationally federated nonprofit, which took me to rural and urban communities, and then, of course, my community here on the border. So I hope y'all will next share your why. So that's my why. If y'all will share in the chat, I do like to read these. It's your turn. Please share with me, out of all the things you could have been doing today at this time, why are you here? What is it that called to you about this topic? What are you interested in learning? Why are you tuning in? And so I'll give you a minute to kind of give me some responses in the chat. I'd love to read them.
And
I'm a
Monica,
big, mhm. Yes, ma'am.
while people are dropping in the chat, there was a question that came in. It was,
Okay, yes.
what is the name of the native land app that you use? So if you want to maybe answer that while people to give people time to drop answers
Yeah,
in.
absolutely. So it is called, I'm going to double check. I'm on my phone. I have a travel screen. It is it's called Native Land, like literally native land. And I use it, it's on my phone. Wherever you go, you put in your area and it'll give you a map. So thanks for the question. All right. So I'm seeing some responses. Oh, thank you all so much. So I see some of you have Latinx community that you're trying to engage with. Please give me your why. I don't know if y'all have seen the very famous Simon Sinek TED Talk that it literally changed my perspective on always starting with the why, no matter what it is that I'm trying to endeavor to do. The why is very important. So I had to be very clear on my why in coming to you with this topic. And so I'd love to read what your whys are in listening and being here today. So thank you all so much for sharing and reading those. Yay. Okay. It also gives me a good insight into what's going on in our field across the country, right? Because it's different wherever we go. And we'll talk about that. Okay. Thank you. I'll keep sharing. I appreciate it. All right. So some of your why, this is the agenda we're going to go over actually. So thank you, Miss Carol. Yes. Appreciate it. So the agenda I have for us today is these 4 things. I did schedule for an hour and a half because I always tend to rush at the end and get questions. And so I don't want to do that. My goal is to finish as early as I can, but I do have the 90 minutes. So please bear with me. If you do have to leave at the 60-minute mark, I understand. It's being recorded. But you won't want to because we have an activity here in a little bit, and hopefully it's interactive for everybody. What I plan to do, thank you, Nicole, for sharing Simon Sinek. Yes, it's a must. It's a must watch. Absolutely. All right, thank y'all for the shares. I'm gonna definitely, what I like to do is get a copy of the chat, Nicole, because I do read the responses and I try to incorporate that into my future talks. Thank you all so much for sharing. All right. So the first thing we're going to do is navigate Latinx identity. Whew, we're going to do that very briefly because it's a big one. But we got to understand this before we can move forward. To explore the landscape that you currently have in your area, perhaps in the Latinx community, then map out what it is you're looking to do, right? What representation you're here because you're wanting to perhaps get more Latinx engagement in your volunteer base. So what do you want that to look like? And then lastly, we're going to arrive at practices. I'm going to share some practices that I would recommend for us all to do. Let me go up one screen though. I think here on this screen, I forgot to mention, here are some of the reasons why you may be here, right? So if one of these rings true for you, please let me know. So maybe you're here because you're realizing that your volunteer program is not going to survive unless you diversify and amplify and include more. That could be one, survivability. Maybe you're good, but you're worried about remaining sustainable in your program, right? It's getting harder and harder to keep the same level of volunteers. Or perhaps it's credibility, right? You notice a mismatch in the community you serve and your volunteer base, right? I've seen that. I've been on the other side of that as well. Maybe you're looking for variety of experience. Maybe you realize in your committees, your advisory groups, you're missing other thoughts, other opinions, other lived experience, right? And you notice that. And of course, it could be equity. You're looking for more equity so that you serve all the community equitably, right? So I could go on and on each one of those, but those are some main topics of some whys that could bring you here today. And I do see a question. How do we welcome Latinx community to our organization? Make them feel okay. Yes, Christine, I love that. We're definitely going to talk about that. So please, parking lot that for me, as I used to say when I was a trainer. Pin it, and if I don't answer that before we're done, come back and remind me. All right. So this is our agenda. We went over that. All right. Any Shrek lovers in the room today? Give me a thumbs up or a heart. To me, Shrek is timeless. I may have to change this reference when I start dating myself. Maybe to a SpongeBob, right? That's more universal, maybe. I don't know. But if you've seen Shrek, you know this quote here, right? Onions have layers, ogres have layers. You get it. We all have layers. So that's very much what I think about when I think of the Latinx identity. It's very layered. It's very nuanced. It's big topics. I could spend hours and hours every night reading commentary and research on the different words to describe us and the pros and cons that people have with each. I'm just going to go very briefly over a little Latinx identity. All right. But we know language, the words we use and understand are very much tied to our identity. And in our case today, they're tied to the cultural identity of Latinx members, right? To engage the Latinx community, our first step is to build on that understanding, right? So here is Shrek. We're talking about layers. My household plays Shrek on loop. It's one of our favorite movies, but that's how I kind of think of Latinx identity. It's layered like an onion. So, in navigating the Latinx identity, we're going to go over a couple of layers. Everybody ready? Before I do that, I want us to remember that the Latinx community is not a monolith at all, like a big X on that. No community really is, especially one as big as a Latinx community. So think of us more as a mosaic, right? A lot of pieces to it. We're more of a mosaic than a monolith. So that's something I'd love for all of us to kind of keep in mind. The first layer, I'm going to try to get through these layers here. So here's a confused Shrek. He's at his swamp. He's a little confused. So I'd like to ask everybody, raise your hand or in the chat, let me know if this is the first time in this workshop that you have heard the word Latinx with the X at the end. Is this the first time you've heard the word Latinx or have you heard it before? Latinx with an X at the end. Okay, Heard the word, never a definition. Okay, thank you. Heard it before. Okay. The reason I ask is because it is, there's a whole conversation on the word itself. I'm not going to get into that, but for a lot of folks, that word is new, right? And so Latinx is one word of many other words. Thank you all for your shares. I appreciate that. You may have also heard these other words referring to our community of Latinx, Hispanic, Latinx. Latinx is meant to be the gender neutral version instead of Latino or Latina, because in case you didn't know, Spanish is very gendered as a language. You may have heard Chicano, Chicana, Spanish. I remember I was in Detroit once, traveling, and at a foodie trip actually in Detroit. It was awesome and great food there. And I remember being asked if I was Spanish, and I was used to that, but I think I know what they meant. Latin is also kind of newer, another gender neutral form of Latino or Latina. I When I get the chance, I prefer mestiza because mestiza is really the definition of what I feel I am, which is my European ancestry from the Spaniard and indigenous background, right? But you may hear these and other words, so it gets a little nuanced, like I said. It's part of the onion, right? So when we talk about our identity, geographical origin is the first layer that I like to go over. So I like this diagram. It shows you the difference. Hispanic or any countries that speak Spanish. They don't have to be necessarily from Latin America. So, for example, you have Spain, right? In Europe, they speak Spanish, they're Hispanic. Then you have countries that are Latino or Latina, and those are countries in Latin America. You do have a lot of countries that are both. And so those are the ones in the middle. So, for example, me, my ancestry, Mexican American, we are both, right? We're from Latin American country and we speak Spanish. So, yes, very similar to the First Nations, Ms. Kristen. Yes, thank you for that. Awesome. So, my hot take, my hot tip on this would be to take it back to zoom in, as the kids say, to zoom in on your area. And what we're talking about today is know your communities, name your communities. Very much also to what we do with First Nations. If you know them, name them, right? So if you know that you have a large Venezuelan community, name them as that, right? And so we'll talk about how to get to know that. I have a little activity for y'all to figure that out. I recently came across this description, this quote, which I really enjoyed. I'm going to have to read her book. And she describes Latinos are prototypical new Americans, the product of European immigration, colonialism, and slavery. So with this journey, that's driven home for her is that being Latino means being from everywhere. And that's exactly what America is supposed to be about. So I really like that quote. I never thought about it that way. But this is just a little bit of our geographical origin as Latinos, Latinas, and the same for those in your community. The second layer I want to talk about, I don't have enough time to talk about it a lot, but the second layer of Latinx identity is generation. I cannot stress enough how important this is. And this makes it challenging. So when I was doing my work in rural communities, urban communities, and I came across a Latinx community, I had to be very in tune, and I could tell from working with them where they were on the generation spectrum, right? Were they recently coming, like were the immigrants that recently came, they first generation, second generation, or more? That makes a huge difference. So as an adult, for example, I understand materials and the formal process that we follow for volunteer opportunities, right? We have pamphlets, we have booklets, we have QR codes, background checks, right? I understand that. I'm an adult, I'm second generation. Somebody that's first, like immigrant coming over, may not have that context. Um, and I see the question, Ellie, yes. Her last name is Cepeda. I have to get her first name, but if you look up her name in that quote, it should come up for you on Google. Yeah, I can't wait to read the book. So keep that in mind. So as I reference So for example, as reference points, if you use reference like Shrek is a reference that I'm making with all of us today, right? Well, if I'm sitting with the community that's, recently arrived immigrant community, they're not going to get that reference. Perhaps they will. I don't know, but I got to keep that in mind, right? So know if you can know where your Latinx community is on this spectrum, the better it is. So for me, myself, for example, we have a lot of immigrant, first, second, third, and so on. But when we get the application, I can kind of tell because of their location sometimes. We get Mexican nationals, right? We live right on the border. And so they want to come volunteer. And so I get that. And so that it's important to know that, right? And reaching out to them. My hot take on this is to make sure that any references we use, any processes can be as universal as possible. So yeah, I can go on and on about that. But second layer is generation, right? It makes a big difference. So if you're in a community, for example, that's just received immigrants coming to your area, you want to be tuned into that when you're doing your outreach, if that's what you're doing. The third layer is race. Again, I would love to talk to this for a while, but very briefly, Latinos and Latinas or the Latinx community can be any race at all. So my children, for example, they're Black Latinos, right? Or what we call Afro Latinos, right? Latinos come in all colors, all races. Your Latinx community can identify as any race or biracial. The fourth layer, and what I have there in the question under race, the image under race here are the questions that get asked at the census, just for context. The last layer I want to talk about when it comes to Latinx identity is language. So I have a little activity for you all on this, and I've done this before, but let me do this with this group here. So I want everybody in the chat to tell me what you see in this picture here. You see the picture with the blue sky? What is there? What do you see? Give me one word to define it. Shelly, thank you for starting it off. Thank you. Thank you. Nice, short, 4-letter word, right? I see. Okay. All right. And this is the response I get, right? You guys are all right. You guys all passed 100%. Correct answer. In English, it is called a kite. And so here's one of the personal challenges I have also with the Spanish language as I keep trying to practice and expand my knowledge of the language. That in Spanish, it's a very expansive language, and a lot of the words are longer than what we would use in English. So what you see here, a kite in English could be defined in any of these ways based on the country. Even though we're all speaking Spanish, we have different names for things. And kite is not the only example. I mean, I could go on and on. I could tell you guys stories, but I'll just leave this here for you. So if you are, for example, from let's see, I've also heard it called papalote. So number 10 in the country of Honduras, I would speak to it as a papalote as opposed to, whatever other word that I may have or okay. So this is just to kind of give you all a glimpse of how expansive the language is. So in your community, in your program, if you are doing translations of materials, if you're doing flyers in Spanish, it's really important to also get that proofed and edited. Multiple people that speak Spanish of your community, right? So here in the border, we tend to have more of a Tex-Mex Spanglish than the proper Spanish that you may hear in other communities. Well, proper to say has the accents, the dialect, right? But we all speak Spanish. It's just different variances of it. So this is why I find Italian so hard. Yep, Alicia, same thing. So when I get to travel to Central South American countries, it's a life experience every time because what I think I am sharing and communicating is not what's being received on the other end, even though we're speaking Spanish. So it makes it interesting, challenging, and fun. Yep. Yep, yep. Oh, Kristen, Caribbean, Colombia, Spanish. Interesting. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So this is my example, real briefly, and then I'll move on. So Bad Bunny. Anybody know Bad Bunny? Have you heard of Bad Bunny? Uh, he's Puerto Rican, and I'm listening to him a lot now because I'm trying to get my ear to the Puerto Rican Spanish. It's faster than what I'm used to, and the words are different. Like for example, the album. Nicole, I'll break. Sorry, I'll break a little bit and then I'll ask. Thank you. So the album he came out with, Debí tirar más fotos. The first word debí to me, or tirar. I'm sorry. The second word tirar in my Spanish means throw away, but in his Spanish it means take or shoot. So I was like, whoa, love it, love it, love it. All the flavors. I just need to learn it more, right? So, Boricua, Marisol, yes, absolutely. Love it. All right, I'm going to move on because I could talk on and on about that. I'll pause here real quickly. Miss Nicole, any questions? Or I'm good to go.
Yes, yes, sorry. Um, and you might be getting to this a little bit later on, but a question did come up. Do you have any advice on how to relay to Latinx or Hispanic people who may be interested in volunteering that our organization is a safe place considering the current political climate and the fears?
Ooh, yes. Whoever asked that question, I'm going to get to that. I had to do kind of a 2.0 version of this presentation. I had to think about it a lot before I came to you all today. So I have a couple slides to talk about that from my point of view. Yep, yep, yep. Thank you for asking. All right, so moving along, we talked about Latinx identity briefly, briefly, briefly. Oh my gosh, I wish I could take a college course on all of that. But briefly, we talked about Latinx identity and how nuanced it is. Nuanced, like layered, like an onion, right? So the next thing I want us to explore is our landscape, right? So I'm taking it back to you all, where you're from. So, where you are in your volunteer program, what does your Latinx representation look like now? What is it likely to change to? So, let's talk about that briefly. That's what I would call your current state. This is also a map of the Shrek kingdom, far, far away. So, you want to see what your kingdom, what your map looks like, right? And so, to assess your current state, uh, there's a lot of data out there. There's quantitative data. And so here's just some examples. My go-to for data is census, of course, census.gov and Pew Research Center. McKinsey does great reporting as well, but those are usually my first three. Miss Gina, I do see your question. Okay, thank you for that. So here is just some results from the 2020, the latest census showing you the nationally the percentage of Hispanic or Latino communities, right? There's tons of reports on the census. Um, I just want to bring this to your attention. There is no lack of data out there. I have been doing such a deep dive recently on into this. You even have other organizations with more specialized data, like Peace Corps, AmeriCorps, but for national data, I go to the census or the Pew Research Center. Here's more data. There's no lack of data, right? So I'm just going to say all that to keep this in mind. Data does change minds, right? Our leaders, our supervisors, for me, my commissioner's court, I can give them data, I can give them numbers, I can give them reports, give them metrics, give them trends, give them patterns. But stories is what is going to change hearts, testimonials, right? Quote, short video. So just keep that in mind when we talk about data. Also keep in mind qualitative data. So if you are someone who's engaged in the community, you're outreaching, you want make sure your program is representative of your community. Keep an eye on how your community is changing, right? What's in your local papers, what are local organizations popping up, local events to go to, especially around holidays to celebrate cultures, local news, social media, right? So these are some examples of what I noticed in my community. We noticed a Brazilian community popping up. And then also Turkish immigrants coming to our community. So just as an example, keep in mind of your qualitative local data as well, local information coming in. So here is where I have a little break for your turn. Everybody ready? So I'm going to now give you all a little assignment. Let me see where I am in time. Okay, so I'm going to do a 5-minute activity, right? Because I really think this is important and vital, and it's how I can give you some tools and resources to take back. So if you don't know what your Latinx community looks like, that's okay, because all the information is out there. I'm going to show you how to get it, how to find it, and then you're going to come back and share with me, please, right? This is our activity. I'm going to give us 5 minutes. So if y'all could take a picture of the screen, the slides that you have there, take a picture of it first, and then I'm going to show you what I'd like for you all to do so that you can find in your community your Hispanic and Latinx population. All right, everybody ready? Okay, so this link that you see here, I'm going to put it in the chat. So please feel free and click on it. I'm going to show you what I'd love for us to do in the 5 minutes. So I'm going to go to that link. It's going to take me to the census information. I already bookmarked it for you. It's exactly where you need to be. So this is the Census Bureau's page that shows you races and ethnicities in the US and Puerto Rico based off the 2020 census. So you have 2 tabs, very simple, a maps and a ranking tab. So you can look at whatever racial or ethnic group you'd like. In our case, for example, we're going to look at Hispanic or Latino, right? You're going to keep it at largest detailed group. Don't mess with that because we want to see the largest groups. And then I'm going to highlight whatever state I'm in. I'm in Texas. It's going to highlight. It's going to show me my dominant group. But I can even break it down further than that, right? If you hover over, it'll tell you there are 9 million approximately, right? Mexican Americans or people of Mexican descent in Texas. The percentage of Hispanic people that are Mexican is 78.9%. You can even break it down into your county, which is where I think it's granular and very helpful for us, especially if you do reporting. So I would recommend you then click on counties here. You guys see this on the right side? You click counties. It automatically showed me Alabama. I'm going to change it to, I'm going to change to Michigan, just random. So here's Michigan, all the counties in Michigan. I'm going to choose my county. Let's say this is my county, right? Again, it's going to show me the number and the percentage of the dominant group, right? You also have this tab called rankings. And so this is what I'm going to actually ask you to get some information for us. If you click on rankings, you're going to do the same thing. You're going to select racial or ethnic group as Hispanic or Latino. I'm going to leave it at Michigan for our example. And I'm going to choose a random county, right? I'm going to assume I'm from this county. And you guys see how it gives a list? So it gives the top racial and ethnic groups, right? Mexican, Spanish, Spaniard, Puerto Rican. And so it gives us the numbers, right? And you can choose any county that corresponds to you. So this is what I like for you to do is in 5 minutes, go to this link, tell me, look your county up and tell me what your top ethnic groups or Latin Hispanic groups are in your county. Or maybe you already done it and you want to share with us here while I was talking and explaining. Any questions on this activity? Kristen, thank you for sharing. Mexican, okay. Okay, I see the shares, yay. Awesome, it's working. Essex County, Puerto Rican, Ecuadorian, Dominican, okay, nice. Yeah, and you'll notice every county is gonna be a little different and that's okay. But it's important to know this because just like our language of Spanish is different, even though we all speak the same language, same thing for maybe how we communicate, right? How we outreach to these groups. Okay. Yay, it's working. Okay, perfect. STL, is that St. Louis? Love St. Louis. Yes, very nice. Thank you. Okay. What do y'all think of this activity and this information? There's tons of information out there in census, but this is like the simple one that I wanted to share with everybody. Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. Keep in mind the census also does data and reports, not just every 10 years. Like they'll have information out there, Puerto Rican and then Mexican. Okay. Nice. Yay. Y'all understood the assignment. Got it. Thank y'all so much. I'm going to go ahead and go back to my presentation. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you all for doing that with me. And so hopefully that will give you more insight into the landscape of your Latinx population in your community so you can embed that into your program. And now you have that awareness, that knowledge. Great. All right. So the next thing we need to do once we have that is to map out what it is where do you want to go? What do you want to see, right? Why are you here? What do you want to change? What is your future state of your volunteer program when it comes to Latinx engagement? And of course, here is a picture of Shrek's swampland, right? Because that's his future state. That's where he wanted to be. What is our future state? What does that look like for us? Here is a little example of where I think or how I think that you can use this information. So you could, for example, just to give you guys an idea here, you could set your destination to something like, I would like to welcome in our program, we would like to welcome X amount of Latinx volunteers this year. It could be X amount of Latinx volunteers in our committees, X amount of Latinx partnerships, right? Could be anything, but just as an example, that could be your destination. Then you want to assess your current state, like we talked about, right? You can do that with the census data. You can do that with current data, surveys, input, canvas the community, just based on what you see and know. I mean, all sorts of resources out there. Then after that, plan for the future state, like we talked about. Both of those steps together is your roadmap, right? Like how you're going to get there. And then lastly, ideally, we arrive to that goal, right? That's how kind of break it down your future state, your current state. But it's good to know where you're at to start, which is why we did that activity a little while ago. So we're now at the part where I share some practices to help us engage with the Latinx community. And so earlier, one of you had a question about that I'm going to speak to on now. This is where I interrupt like our regularly scheduled program because in doing this presentation now, I did a lot of reflection and thought, and I felt I needed to add a little bit more. So these next slides were not in the presentation I've done before. I had to ask myself, right? I have to acknowledge current events, regardless of what side we were on. But current events do shape our reality, right? Do they not? So beyond or perhaps because of politics, volunteerism is no different. So it just feels right now to share, doesn't feel right to share the same practices. So here is kind of what I've been thinking and ruminating over and have found a version 2.0, if you will. Like, now what? Those of you that maybe sat in this workshop the first time I did it, it's a very different landscape now, right? So maybe you've been working on this plan, engaging Latinx community members, and now everything that's going on and happening, do you adjust? Do you change? Where do you go? What do we do now? Where do we go from here? And now what? Right. So really, I don't have a lot of answers, but I can share questions that I've come up with that can help us come to our own answers because it'll be different for all of us. All of that rooted in the knowledge that our brown communities are very much hurting, a lot of them scared and uncertain. So just keep that in mind. And what I would recommend is asking ourselves question number one: is this the right time? I don't know. Maybe yes, maybe no. Is it the right time for you and your program, me and my program, to recruit Latinx volunteers? And that's something that only we can answer, right? Is it the right time to um, engage Latinx communities, right? Or is it better? Is it a time to do something else, right? And you fill in the blank here. Is this the time to support, to ally, to learn, to advocate? And again, only we can answer that. It's a deliberate choice. And trust me, I know how odd it is for me as someone who um, is very much a volunteer engagement recruiter all the time, 100%, always on, for me to sit here and say, is this the right time? That's a big, big leap for me, but I have to be very honest with you, with me, and it may not be, right? It depends on our situation, where you're at, what's going on. So the opposite of odd is normal. And these times just don't feel very normal, right? So if you decide that it's better, it's for you and you're to do something else, whether that's support, ally, learn, advocate, as opposed to recruiting, how do we do that? Right. And again, I don't have a lot of concrete answers. Nobody does right now. But my next question will help us answer the first question. So I'd like for us to ask ourselves, how is the trust? At the core of everything, volunteerism is about trust, right? I think we can all agree on that. Any relationship in customer service, especially, it's about trust. Volunteerism, especially. I mean, these individuals are giving us their time, their attention, their talents freely, right? They have to trust us. So, how is the trust in your community with the Latinx population? Ask ourselves that. Nationally, we can assess and gauge the level of trust. We can see that. But locally, only you can zoom in. Have you noticed that your Latinx volunteers are leaving your organization, or you're unable to recruit them like before? Do you see less foot traffic at events where you would see Latinx populations more? Have you seen an uptick in maybe Latinx volunteerism and advocacy? Does that align with your organization? I'll give you all an example I noticed here last week. Me and a friend, I work downtown, which is right by the border. Like I could walk to it. And we went on lunch, like we usually do, to the little shops that we have there. Because a lot of people will come over from Juarez and shop. And it's been like that forever. Um, and on this day last week, it was empty. There was nobody there. It was eerily empty. So that's something we're noticing, right? It's going to affect everything. So what are you noticing in your community? How is the trust? And then how do you go? Where do you go from there? So I hope that helps answer the question I had before. If your answer to my question was it's not a right time for our organization to recruit or engage with Latinx members, but I would like to support, ally, advocate, champion with them, I'm just going to put these up very briefly, right? My suggestions are just be known, go to their meetings, go to their events, call them, see what we can do, see how we can collaborate, show up, join if it's a member type of organization, share their information, right? Learn about them, learn about what's going on. That doesn't require anything other than us expanding our knowledge. Advocate, bear witness. I actually am a volunteer with an organization. It's a big part of what we do. We try to bear witness to what's going on, and connect, really. So this list that I'm giving you really speaks to us building those long-term relationships that are not transactional, right? That are long term. So even though things are the way they are now, we're building on that relationship with our Latinx community. And then my last tip would be to remember that Cesar Chavez is a national there's a national federal holiday to recognize him, March 31st, coming up next month. If your organization has done something to honor him or something for that holiday in the past, reconsider maybe, or perhaps do something, right? So just keep that in mind as well. And so those are my tips on if this is not the right time to recruit Latinx volunteers for you, your organization, what what else can we do? Any questions on any of that, Miss Nicole or anybody?
We do have a few questions.
Okay, sure.
One is from Colin, and he said that when translating materials for volunteers, would you recommend that we use the census information to focus in on the translations that would make most sense for the majority? I always worry about using the wrong Spanish terms, probably because my Spanish teacher was from Mexico and my exchange student friend was from this resulted in me using the wrong word, like quote unquote wrong words a lot. I feel
Right.
that deeply.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Thanks, Colin. I would recommend, yes, if now you know that your dominant Hispanic population is from Venezuela, for example, then I would see if you have volunteers or connections to that community that can maybe proof, right? And then my other tip would be what I try to do is use as few words as possible, right? So wordy flyers as they are not really, really cool. Um, but especially if you're translating into another language, I try to use as few words as possible. But those would be my two insights. So thank you so much. I'm gonna keep going. I have a few slides. I know we're 5 minutes to the hour. I have a few slides left related to practices to share with you all. And I think we'll come back to that topic as well, Colin. Here are some possible changes in the Latinx engagement of volunteers that I am expecting to see based on everything I've read and you know the communities. We could see a regression of formal volunteerism. There's a big difference between formal and informal. Um, an increase in faith-based volunteerism is what I'm noticing. Increase in activism, especially, and then an increase in local grassroots volunteerism. So, for example, neighborhood associations, right? In local county, local government, those types of volunteer efforts. And then, of course, I love this quote by Miss Susan Ellis, volunteering that is very much a political act at its core. So I try to remember that as well. All right. So I will go ahead and share my briefly some practices based on everything we talked about. So for your program, right? So the first practice that I would definitely encourage us to do is expand on cultural awareness. So there's so much to this. So I'm just gonna leave this up here. Lingos, acronyms, terminology. Keep in mind they may not translate well across Latinx communities. Earlier I asked somebody asked how to be welcoming. How do we make them feel like they belong, right? So that comes into the recruitment of them and the space. And do we have somebody to greet them? And do we have somebody there to maybe translate if necessary? So definitely want to be welcoming to them in that space. Onboarding. Do we offer high tech or low tech options? Do we require IDs, social security numbers, background checks, right? So consider all of that. Training. Are our materials available in Spanish? Do we offer translation if necessary? I had a situation where everybody in the room spoke English. So I was going to speak in English, except for one person. So any guesses on what I did? Because my Spanish was not that good to be able to do both at the same time. Any guesses? What would you do if you had a room? They all spoke English except for one person that spoke another language. Problem solving? Any thoughts, ideas? Oh, I'm gonna give you all the answer. So what I did was Google Translate. Cindy, I love that. I didn't even think about translate. Yeah. So what I did, and it off the top of my head, right? Because adult learning background, I noticed I did this instinctively, even before I knew what I was doing. I had a young lady from college, and she was a volunteer. So she came and I sat her down. And when this lady came that I knew only spoke Spanish, I sat her down next to her, and I asked the young lady to translate. So that was the easiest thing to do. So keep that in mind. There usually will always be somebody else in the room that can speak or understand Spanish. Communication, phone still rules. WhatsApp is amazing in the Latinx community. So I would look into that. Keep in mind very traditional gender roles in the Latinx community, depending again on their generation, right? The spectrum. Make your events fun, family friendly. Food always helps. Um, many cases I've asked people to volunteer. When I worked at Girl Scouts, for example, had moms, daughters come to me, for example, and signing them to volunteer. And I was used to them saying, you know what, I have to ask. Let me ask my husband. Let me go back and ask, and I'll come back to you. And that I was okay with that. Like that's their preference, right? So keep that in mind. And then simplify, informalize. I cannot stress enough how important it is to simplify your process. Progress gradually with your Latinx volunteers if you can. And then keep in mind that helping is universal, volunteering is not. So, what that means is there are lots of processes in our formal structure that may not translate well. See what we can do to accommodate and simplify that. Um, Next tip is show the representation you want and that you have. So here are examples of flyers that are showing representation. This one here on the right is from our local organization in Juarez. It's in Spanish. It's showing. I'm a big believer in using pictures of your community, your volunteers. If you have them, use them. And definitely, even not just flyers. So I when I go to a lot of events, conferences, and I see panel speakers, do they represent your community? Do they represent who you're wanting to attract? Right, keep that in mind. As an example, I went to a conference recently. It was a event in the evening, Friday evening, and there was a panel of experts on immigration. Because this is a hotbed, right? So I went to listen, and I did notice none of them were Hispanic or Latinos or Latinas, and that caught me off guard, right? Um, if you have to do that, they did very good in that they explained that their person in charge or their person that should have been there that night could not be there, but they were from that community. So, for example, somebody introduced themselves as the director of operations, and their CEO, who was a Hispanic woman, she was off in DC, right? And so I thought that was really interesting, and I appreciated that. So keep representation in mind in everything that you do. My next step is to seek your front line. So I only have a couple more slides left. Um, if this is daunting and you're like, where do I start? I don't know how to get there. I have a lot of work to do. Start with one. Start with one, collaborate with the local organization, be known to them, start that relationship, ask them to help you maybe translate or proofread, right? As a volunteer, they don't know that they're doing it informally, perhaps, but start that with one. Whether, and these are some of the positions that you could consider having Latinx volunteers, an ambassador, a mentor, advisory committee member, interpreter, right? So start with one, and then hopefully that one will grow, and that can be your front lane mentorship type of group for other Latinx volunteers. Word of mouth is still huge in the Latinx community. Let me just say that. We have a volunteer that started at where I work, and she brought in 3 volunteers just on her own. And so word of mouth is still really, really big. I think this is my last tip. So I cannot again stress the importance of investing in long-term community relationships in the Latinx community. Um, our national population, 19-20% are Latinx. It's going to grow and grow only. So please start and keep those long-term community relationships going. This is a list of some organizations I'd recommend you look up in your community and start those relationships with. I was speaking to a community member recently in a different part of the country who wasn't sure how to outreach to her Latinx community and didn't know where to start. I said, start with, your local, I guarantee there's going to be a local eatery that serves Mexican or Tex-Mex food. Start with that. Put up a flyer, right? And go with that. But there's lots of resources here in this list. So please use them. It starts with being known to them and offering ourselves as a resource, attending their events. And then ask yourself, where does my volunteer program and these organizations intersect, right? Do they intersect and how? I guarantee you that most of them will do. Um, all right. And I think that is it. Whew, that was a lot of information. Here is what we've gone over. Oh, any questions before I
Yes.
move on? Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
there are a
Thank you.
couple, and I think somebody might have to jump off, so I want to try and see if we can catch.
Yes. Sure.
It says if we do not track, like ask or record volunteer ethnicity, what do you recommend to estimate current engagement as a starting point for goal setting on how many Latinx vols we want to engage in the future?
Oh, I love that question. I love that question because y'all have no idea how many hours I have spent up late at night researching, and I have a very hard time finding any demographics on volunteers. And I understand why, but it makes it hard, right? And so I can find reports on the Peace Corps, the UN, and the reports they have done on their volunteer base. But for information on a national level of where demographics of our volunteers, if you guys have found it, please let me know. I have not. And so it makes it hard. And so I appreciate the question. So what I would recommend is, and depends on the size of your organization. But honestly, number one, is your volunteer program, does it have multi-layers? So for example, if you have committees as volunteers, committees are usually smaller. What does that look like? Is that representative of your community? I would start with that. Um, I also, as much as I may not like to say it, our profession itself, um, is it representative or is it not representative of the communities we serve? I like to start with that. And that then leads me to know it's not as representative as we would like, right? Many times I am the only brown person in the group. And if I'm the only brown person in a group of volunteer professionals, then I tend to believe I may be the only, we may not have a lot of brown volunteers that look like me, or others like me. So there is that mirror, right, to put up to ourselves. I would put that mirror up to your smaller volunteer groups, committee groups. Look at your events and see what you see as far as representation there. I hope that helps, but that's kind of my approach to it right now.
Thank you, Monica. And I have
Mhm.
another one. In reference to show the representation that you want and have, is there a way to do this without othering or making the few Latinx volunteers feel tokenized?
Yeah, I like the comment that Ms. Kristen has. We did the same, Kristen, when I worked at a larger nonprofit. We in the application we'd ask for ethnicity, race. It was always optional, always optional. So I do like that as an option. Um, I think just doing that doesn't tokenize it at all. I think what we have to be careful is in how we then take action on that or not, right? And so I hope that answers that question, Nicole. But I'd be careful to single out, of course, volunteers based on any ethnicity or race, right? Of course. So maybe I feel more comfortable having a private conversation with them on something as opposed to in a group setting, as an example. I would invite them, welcome them to provide me feedback, maybe offside, one on one. That way I'm sure not to make them feel othered. That would be my suggestions on that.
And I would just chime in and just what kind of what you said, Monica. Having a conversation with people, and that's where that whole relationship building comes in general when we're building relationship with our volunteers, and
Mm,
then just in that opportunity when you're building that relationship to have that conversation and ask them like, would you be okay? And then if they are, go for it,
mhm, mhm.
but and it goes all the way back to that slide that you said earlier, is that development of trust, so make
Yes,
sure to develop the trust before the ask. And I
right.
think it will make a huge difference.
Yeah, and I can't tell you result of recent events. I felt it in my stomach because I knew that we'd taken two steps forward on this topic and now maybe five steps back. But we continue. we continue and we must. So, yep, I agree. This has been great. Thank you all so much.
Oh, listen, I'm not trying to knock it.
That's okay.
I know your
That's
slide,
okay.
but
I
I
think
always
I don't know
forget
if my
to put the slide up.
yeah, I don't know if my slides are still showing, but I'm
I
pretty
can
much
put it
done.
back.
No, no, it's okay. I just concluded with the wrap up of what we did. Thank you. I know some people had to log off, but I'm glad I got through most of it. So in the 60 minutes. But thank you all so much for attending. This has been great. This is my passion. I love to talk about it. Feel free and reach out to me and connect. I have had some people ask questions. Not, for example, background check companies, not all of them, or most of that I know, do not require social security numbers, as an example. So if you have questions like that or anything, please let me know. I'm happy to connect. Thank you, Nicole, for having me and for being
Of
awesome.
course. Thank you so much for being here. I wanted to put this last slide up because I know we always forget. We always get so caught up in everything, we forget to put it up. Your feedback is important. Like we said, how we're planning. If Monica would love any feedback that you have to share as well. Um, and then if you are interested in presenting, Monica is a graduate of our presenter bootcamp. And if you've interested in presenting or you have a really great idea or you want to learn more about programs and what we're doing, please feel free to email us at programs@volunteer alive, and we will get that to Carol Ayers, who is our Alive Programs Committee Chair. And she is more than happy to chat with you on any questions that you might have. I think I am gonna try and Monica, if you're okay, I'm gonna drop your LinkedIn in the chat
Yes,
so
yes,
people can connect. I am a huge believer in connecting that way. This definitely is the beginning of a conversation. Let it be the start. And if you have questions, please feel free to reach out to Monica. Um, I think that's the last slide. Yes. So I'm gonna go ahead and stop this, but I'll hang out just for a little bit. Maybe like 5 more minutes just in case anybody else has any more questions if they're still coming in. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining us. We know that there are so many other things that you could be doing with your day, and the fact that you took the time to stop and come out and be with us, we do not take that for granted. Hoping you have a really great rest of your week, and we'll see you later. Bye-bye.